In the bustling streets of Dakar, where the Atlantic wind carries both salt and secrets, a young woman named Zainab sat huddled against iron gates. These were not just any gates. These were the gates of what had been her home since childhood, the compound where her father, Ibrahima Diallo, had built an empire from thread and cloth. 23 summers had passed since Zainab drew her first breath, and on this night, this terrible, rain-soaked night, she clutched a photograph of her father while her stepmother Miriam threw her possessions into the muddy street like refuse. Miriam stood dry beneath the covered porch, her expensive Gelly head wrap perfectly arranged, her boo-boo dress untouched by the storm. The security guards changed the locks with the efficiency of men who had been paid well to silence their consciences. Neighbors peered through curtains but did not open their doors. In Africa, we have a saying, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. And so the people stayed silent, unwilling to be trampled. But across the rain-slicked street, a black Range Rover sat with its engine purring, soft as a leopard's breath. Behind tinted windows, a man watched. His diamond cufflinks caught the lightning's flash as he leaned forward, his jaw tightening with each piece of luggage that hit the ground. Who was this stranger? And why did his presence feel like the calm before an even greater storm? "Your father is dead, you foolish village girl." Miriam's voice cut through the downpour sharp as a panga blade. "This house belongs to me now. I have no room for pretenders who claim what is not theirs." In her manicured hands, she held a burning paper, Zainab's birth certificate, and watched the flames consume the young woman's very identity. To understand how a beloved daughter became a discarded orphan, we must journey back to where this tale truly began. To the village of Toba, where red earth holds memories like treasured cowrie shells and tradition flows through daily life like the rhythm of the talking drums. Zainab's story started in a modest compound where her father, Ibrahima Diallo, had built a textile business from nothing but skill and determination. His hand-woven Kent cloths were sought from Dakar to Dubai, each piece telling stories in gold thread and indigo dye. Her mother, Fatu, was known throughout the village for her voice, a voice that could make even the ancestors pause in their eternal rest to listen. When she sang while dyeing cloth, women said the colors came out brighter. When she hummed while cooking, the food tasted sweeter. But when Zainab was 7 years old, sickness came for Fatu. It came quietly, like a thief in the night, and by the time the healers were called, even their strongest medicines could not turn back death's dark hand. On her deathbed, Fatu stroked her daughter's braided hair and spoke words that would echo through the years. "Remember this always, my child. Your kindness will be your crown. No matter how dark the night becomes, the morning sun will find those with pure hearts." The child nodded, not understanding that these words were both blessing and prophecy. For 3 years after his wife's death, Ibrahima devoted himself entirely to his daughter and his craft. He taught her the intricate patterns of their ancestral weaving traditions while building a business empire that would span 3 nations. But loneliness is a powerful force, and eventually it opened the door to destruction. Then Miriam arrived in Tauba. She came like a sudden storm, beautiful, sophisticated, carrying the intoxicating scent of French perfume and promises of cosmopolitan dreams. She claimed to be visiting relatives, but the village gossips whispered that she had heard about the prosperous widower and his growing fortune. 10-year-old Zainab watched with growing unease as this elegant stranger studied their home with calculating eyes. Her gaze lingered on valuable Kent cloths. Her fingers touched surfaces as if mentally appraising their worth. "Papa," Zainab whispered one evening while helping sort the latest textile collection. "The new woman looks at our things the way the marketplace women count money." Ibrahima chuckled, his weathered hands gentle on his daughter's head. He could not see the predator hidden beneath Miriam's charming exterior. In Africa, we say, "The snake that bites you was hiding in the grass you trusted." Within 6 months, wedding drums echoed through Tauba as Ibrahima married his second wife. The villagers celebrated with palm wine and traditional praise songs, not knowing they were witnessing the beginning of a carefully orchestrated deception. Miriam brought her teenage son, Kwame, into their home. For a brief moment, it seemed their compound had become a place of renewed joy. But termites work quietly in the wood before the whole house falls. The first signs of trouble appeared like cracks in a clay pot, small enough to dismiss, but deep enough to eventually shatter everything. When Zainab won the Regional Academic Excellence Award, Mariam was conveniently absent, claiming a sudden headache that mysteriously disappeared once the ceremony ended. When the girl graduated top of her secondary school class, her stepmother ensured the celebration dinner focused on Kwame's mediocre football achievements instead. "Why must we constantly hear about academic achievements?" Mariam would mutter, her voice carrying just far enough for Zainab to hear. In Dakar, real intelligence means understanding how the world actually works, not burying your nose in dusty books. The subtle cruelties multiplied. Zainab's university application was accidentally submitted late. Her acceptance letter from Sheikh Anta Diop University was misplaced until Mariam's friend's daughter needed a replacement opportunity. Even Ibrahima seemed blind to the psychological warfare being waged under his own roof. Love, they say, can blind even the wisest man. At university, Zainab felt the weight of being different. Her classmates arrived in expensive cars while she took crowded buses. They spoke casually of family connections in government and business while she talked about her father's village workshop. But rather than letting these differences embitter her, Zainab threw herself into her studies with fierce determination. Her professors noted her exceptional analytical skills. She worked part-time in the university library, sending most of her earnings back to help village children pay school fees. Her roommates marveled at her ability to maintain academic excellence while juggling multiple responsibilities. They never knew she was driven by her mother's dying words about kindness being her crown. During holiday visits home, however, she began noticing disturbing changes. Her father looked increasingly tired. Phone conversations stopped abruptly when she entered a room. Mariam began taking mysterious trips to Dakar, always returning with expensive purchases but offering vague explanations. The textile workshop that had once buzzed with creative energy now felt tense. Workers whispered among themselves and cast nervous glances toward the main house. The conversation that changed everything happened on a humid night when secrets traveled on currents of betrayal. Zainab had awakened thirsty and was tiptoeing toward the kitchen when Mariam's voice drifted through the darkness like poison in water. "Yes, the paperwork is ready. Once he signs the new will, everything transfers to Kwame automatically. The village girl won't even know what happened until it's too late." Zainab's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She crept closer to the window, bare feet silent on the concrete floor. "The lawyer confirmed it," Mariam continued, satisfaction dripping from her voice. "As long as she's not officially adopted, she has no legal claim. And since we never completed those adoption papers," Ibrahima kept talking about, "well, blood may be thicker than water, but legal documents are thicker than both." The words hit Zainab like physical blows. She wasn't legally her father's daughter. Everything she had believed about her place in the world was built on quicksand. In our tradition, we say, the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. But Zainab was not that child. Even in her devastation, she remained her mother's daughter, kind, patient, waiting for justice. The morning sun would rise on a different world than the one she had known just hours before. 2 weeks after overhearing that devastating conversation, fate made the choice for Zainab in the most brutal way possible. Ibrahima collapsed during a business meeting in Dakar. The doctors called it a sudden heart attack, but Zainab suspected her father had died from the burden of secrets he couldn't share. In his final moments at the hospital, surrounded by the antiseptic smell of medicine and the steady beeping of machines, her father gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Zainab," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "In my old Kent cloth, the one with gold threads, there's something important. Something that will protect you when I cannot." His eyes held urgency that transcended his failing body. Before she could ask what he meant, before she could beg him to stay, the machines began their terrible final song. That night, as family members gathered for traditional mourning ceremonies, Mariam moved with the efficiency of a woman who had been rehearsing this moment for years. The morning after the funeral became the dawn of Zainab's systematic destruction. Her stepbrother, Kwame, arrived at her door with eyes that couldn't meet hers. "Zainab," he said, his voice cracking, "I need to tell you about Papa's business debts." He pulled out a folder thick with official documents. "There's massive debt, more than the business is worth. Mama says we have to sell everything just to avoid bankruptcy." But as Zainab examined the documents, her trained eye caught inconsistencies. The signatures were forgeries, skillfully done, but unmistakably different from the handwriting she had known since childhood. When she pointed this out, Kwame's mask slipped completely. "Are you calling me a liar?" His voice turned cold. "Are you saying our mother forged documents?" The word "R" hung in the air like a challenge, deliberately emphasizing Zainab's outsider status. Then came the killing blow. "Zainab, you're not family. Not legally. The adoption papers Papa promised to file, he never completed them. You have no claim to anything here." He threw legal documents on her bed like weapons. Birth certificates, adoption records, inheritance laws, all confirming her worst fears. But then came an even crueler betrayal. Her childhood friend Aisha arrived with tears streaming down her face. "I have to tell you something," Aisha whispered. "I've been reporting to Mama Mariam. Everything you told me about university, your plans, your dreams, I passed it all along." At the lawyer's office in Dakar, Zainab found herself facing Maitre Diop, a man whose expensive suit couldn't disguise the shifty quality of his character. "Miss Fado," he said deliberately, refusing to acknowledge her connection to Ibrahima by using only her mother's surname. "I understand you have concerns about your late guardian's estate." The word guardian tasted like poison. Behind his desk sat a photograph of him shaking hands with Miriam at an expensive Dakar restaurant, both smiling like conspirators. "You've been working with her all along," Zainab realized. The lawyer's smile was thin as a knife blade. "Mrs. Mariam Diallo is my client, and she has instructed me to inform you that any harassment of her family, any false claims against the estate, any attempts to disrupt the legitimate transfer of property will result in serious legal consequences." The very law that should have been her shield had been transformed into her enemy's sword. The girl who had sworn sisterhood under starlit village skies had been bought and sold for a few thousand francs. Back in Tauba village, Zainab appealed to the council of elders beneath the ancient baobab tree where generations had sought wisdom and fairness. These were men who had blessed her naming ceremony, who had praised her academic achievements, who had called her our daughter when she brought honor to the village. But when she arrived at the sacred meeting ground, she discovered that Miriam had gotten there first, with bribes disguised as community development gifts. The eldest council member, Baba Amadou, looked at her with eyes clouded by age and something more troubling, shame. "Zainab, my child," he said, his voice weaker than she remembered. "We have heard claims from both sides. We have considered the evidence." The evidence consisted of legal papers provided by corrupt lawyers and medical reports claiming her father's mind had been affected by his final illness. Even more devastating, Miriam had donated a new borehole to the village, repaired the school roof, and promised to expand the health clinic, using money stolen from Zainab's own inheritance to buy the silence of the very people who should have been her protectors. In Africa, we have a proverb: when the music changes, so does the dance. The elders had changed their dance to match Miriam's tune. That night, wandering through her village in defeat, Zainab found herself drawn to her father's old workshop, now padlocked and already showing signs of abandonment. Remembering his final words about the cloth with gold threads, she squeezed through a gap in the wall, ignoring splinters that tore at her clothes. In the corner, draped over a wooden frame, hung her father's masterpiece, a Kent cloth woven with threads of gold so fine they seemed to capture starlight itself. With trembling hands, she lifted the precious fabric, feeling along its edges. Hidden in the hem, sewn with careful precision, she found a small object wrapped in cloth that smelled faintly of her father's favorite palm wine. A digital storage device and a brass key. But before she could examine her discovery, voices shattered the night silence. "She's in there." Kwame's voice cut through the darkness. "I saw her break in." Security guards surrounded the workshop. Flashlights blazed through the broken walls. "Stealing from the dead now, are we?" Miriam's voice carried cold satisfaction. "This is what desperation does to people." As the guards dragged her from the workshop, Zainab clutched the Kent cloth to her chest, feeling the hidden devices pressing against her ribs like secret promises. What she didn't notice was the black Range Rover parked beyond the village square, its engine running quietly, while a figure inside spoke into his phone with quiet authority. "Yes, sir. She found it. The storage device is secure. Now we wait for the right moment." The game was about to change. Part 10, Under the Bridge. 3 weeks of homelessness taught Zainab lessons about survival that no university course could have provided. Under the Corniche Bridge in Dakar, she found a community of forgotten people who shared their meager meals and offered protection from both weather and predators. The Kent cloth became her blanket, her pillow, her connection to better times. The hidden storage device remained her secret hope. She worked odd jobs in markets and bus stations, saving every coin while studying the contents of her father's final gift during stolen moments. The device contained video recordings, financial documents, and correspondence that painted a picture of systematic fraud so comprehensive that even corrupt officials would struggle to ignore it. But without money for lawyers or connections to people with power, the truth felt as useless as rain during drought season. Her clothes grew shabby. Her shoes developed holes. Her stomach learned the hollow ache of irregular meals. But her spirit remained unbroken because her mother's words about kindness being her crown had taken root so deeply that external circumstances couldn't uproot them. What she didn't know was that her suffering was being observed by someone with the power to transform her situation. The black Range Rover appeared on a morning when despair felt heavier than the humid Dakar air. When the door opened, a man stepped out who seemed to carry authority in his very bones. He was tall, dark-skinned, with silver threading through his carefully trimmed beard, wearing a traditional agbada hand embroidered with gold thread, but paired with Italian leather shoes worth more than most people's annual income. "Miss Diallo," he said, and his voice carried the quiet power of someone accustomed to being heard. "My name is Abdullah Ndiaye. I knew your father, and I've been watching your stepmother's activities for months." Zainab clutched the Kent cloth tighter, suspicious. "Are you another lawyer? Another person Miriam sent to threaten me?" Something flickered across the stranger's face, perhaps respect for her caution. "I am many things, young woman, but I am not your enemy. Your father saved my life once, and now I intend to return that favor by saving yours." Then he said something that made the morning air itself seem to vibrate with potential. "I've been investigating your stepmother's fraud for months, and she made one crucial mistake. She tried to steal from a man who left his most precious secrets with someone she never suspected existed." The drive to Abdullah's office in Plateau revealed a Dakar most people never experienced: glass towers that pierced clouds, boardrooms where fortunes changed hands with casual ease. "Who are you really?" Zainab asked as they rode the elevator to the 40th floor. "I'm what people call a billionaire now," Abdullah replied with a slight smile. "But 30 years ago, I was a village boy from Toba whose family couldn't afford secondary school fees. Your father gave me my first job, taught me about fabrics and business, treated me like the son he didn't yet have." The elevator doors opened to reveal an office that looked like a fusion of traditional African artistry and contemporary luxury. Kent patterns were woven into modern furniture designs. Ancient Wolof carvings sat beside state-of-the-art technology. On the walls were photographs spanning decades, showing progression from humble village workshops to international fashion shows. But in one corner, Zainab spotted an image that made her heart skip. Her father standing beside a young man who was unmistakably Abdullah, both covered in textile dyes and smiling. "When I made my first million," Abdullah continued, "I came back to thank your father and offer to repay everything. But he refused my money and asked for something else instead." He pressed a button on his desk and a wall screen descended from the ceiling, displaying photographs, financial records, and legal documents. "He made me promise that if anything ever happened to him, if his daughter ever needed protection from people who would use her kindness against her, I would be her shield." "Your stepmother is not who she claims to be," Abdullah explained. "Her real name is Miriam Sow, and she has done this before. Married wealthy widowers, manipulated inheritance laws, stolen from grieving children across 3 countries." The screen showed newspaper clippings. "Widow accused of inheritance fraud in Abidjan. Accra businessman's children sue stepmother. Bamako property dispute involves forged will." Each article revealed the same pattern of seduction, marriage, systematic asset transfer, and abandonment. "She's a professional predator," Abdullah said, "but your father was smarter than she gave him credit for." The storage device you found contains more than just evidence. It holds video recordings of her meetings with corrupt lawyers, audio of her planning to forge his will, financial records showing systematic asset transfers. Then Abdoulaye revealed something that made the situation even more complex. "There's something else you need to understand about why this case matters so deeply to me," he said, his professional demeanor softening. "Your father would tell me stories about your kindness, your intelligence, your refusal to let hardship make you bitter. When I watched you being thrown from your home that night, when I saw you choose dignity over revenge, I knew your father had been right about your character." He paused. "I didn't just fall in love with the idea of justice. I fell in love with you." Before Zainab could process Abdoulaye's confession, the office doors burst open. Mariam strode in, flanked by two men in expensive suits, her lawyer and a man who carried himself with the arrogant authority of corrupt power. "Mr. Ndiaye," Mariam said with false sweetness, "I understand you've been filling my stepdaughter's head with lies." Abdoulaye didn't stand. His calm demeanor was more insulting than any verbal response. "Mrs. So," he replied, deliberately using her real name, "should I address you by one of your other married names from your previous fraud convictions?" Miriam's composure cracked slightly. "This is Commissioner Traore," she said, gesturing to the man beside her lawyer. "He's here to inform you that harboring a criminal suspect is itself a crime." The commissioner stepped forward with swagger. "Mr. Ndiaye, this young woman is wanted for questioning regarding theft of family property and making false claims against a grieving widow." But then Abdoulaye smiled with quiet confidence. "Commissioner Traore, tell me, how much did Mrs. Sao pay you to fabricate these charges? Was it more or less than the 3 million francs she gave you to ignore the fraud investigation in Abidjan 4 years ago?" The wall screen displayed bank transfer records, photographs of the commissioner and Mariam at expensive restaurants, recorded phone conversations discussing specific bribery amounts. The commissioner's face transformed from arrogant authority to sweating panic. "This is fabricated evidence," he stammered. "I can prove everything," Abdoulaye replied, rising from his chair. "When you have enough money and enough patience, you can hire the best investigators in Africa. You can access bank records, phone transcripts, travel documentation, surveillance footage." Miriam's sophisticated mask shattered. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. I have connections. People like Judge Cisse," Abdoulaye interrupted. "The one you paid 50,000 euros to rule against Zainab's inheritance claim? Or Police Superintendent Dion, who agreed to dismiss fraud complaints in exchange for his son's admission to an expensive private school?" The wall screen now displayed a web of corruption so vast that even Mariam seemed stunned. "The mistake you made, Mrs. Sao, was assuming that because Ibrahima was a simple village businessman, his allies would be equally simple and powerless. There's one more thing your father's storage device contains," Abdoulaye said, turning to Zainab. The screen filled with her father's face, slightly pale but unmistakably coherent, sitting in what appeared to be a law office. "If you are watching this, my beloved daughter," Ibrahima's recorded voice filled the room, "it means God has called me home and the predators have begun their attack. But I want you to know that everything I built was always meant for you." The video will continue with devastating legal precision. The textile business, the house in Dakar, the compound in Toba, the land holdings across 3 nations, all belong entirely to my daughter, Zainab Fatou Diallo. I have also established a trust fund for her education and future endeavors, managed by my dear friend Abdoulaye Ndiaye. Then came the revelation that made even Mariam gasp. "Furthermore, I am fully aware that my wife Mariam has been attempting to manipulate legal documents, forge my signature, and conspire with corrupt officials to steal my daughter's inheritance. I have documented evidence of these activities." The screen filled with surveillance footage showing Mariam with lawyers in secret meetings. Audio recordings of her discussing forgery techniques. Financial transactions traced through multiple accounts. "There's one more thing," Abdoulaye said, his professional demeanor melting away. "Zainab, your father didn't just ask me to protect your inheritance. In his final days, he shared with me his greatest regret, that he hadn't found a way to shield you from the beginning." He paused, vulnerable. "He asked me to do more than preserve your financial legacy. He asked me to love you the way you deserve to be loved, to be the family you lost, to stand by you not just as a business partner or legal guardian, but as a husband if you would have me." The proposal hung in the air like incense. "You're proposing marriage?" Zainab whispered. "I'm honoring a dying man's wish while following my own heart," Abdullah replied with simple honesty. "I fell in love with your character long before I met you in person." "This is ridiculous." Miriam finally found her voice. "You can't buy a wife like you purchase a business contract." But Abdullah smiled. "Mrs. Sao, I'm about to show you exactly how African traditions work when they're backed by justice instead of corruption." Abdullah pressed one final button, and the office doors opened to reveal something magical. A full traditional wedding procession entered, drummers in elaborate robes whose rhythms made the building itself dance. Praise singers whose voices could wake ancestors. Elderly women carrying kola nuts and palm wine with the reverence of priestesses. Most shocking of all, the village elders from Tauba appeared, led by Baba Amadou himself, their faces glowing with something like redemption. "What is this?" Zainab stammered. "My child." Baba Amadou stepped forward, his voice trembling with emotion. "We have come to correct a terrible wrong, to restore honor that should never have been taken from you." The village council that had rejected her now stood before her with genuine humility. When Mr. Ndiaye showed us the evidence of Mrs. Sao's deception, another elder continued, "When we learned how we had been manipulated into betraying one of our own daughters, we knew we had to make amends." The elders prostrated themselves in genuine remorse. "The borehole she donated to our village," Baba Amadou said, "was built with money stolen from your father's business. The school roof repairs, paid for with your rightful inheritance." While police officers led Mariam, her corrupt lawyer, and the compromised commissioner away in handcuffs, a traditional wedding ceremony began. Zainab wore a traditional iro and buba crafted from her father's finest Kent cloth. The gold threads that had once concealed digital secrets now caught the light like captured starfire. Abdullah was resplendent in an agbada that incorporated traditional Wolof patterns with contemporary elegance. "Do you take this woman?" Baba Amadou asked in Wolof. "To be your wife? Your partner in prosperity and adversity?" "I do," Abdullah replied, first in French, then in Wolof, then in English. "Do you take this man?" the elder asked Zainab. "To be your husband, your protector without domination, your equal in all things that matter?" Zainab looked into Abdullah's eyes and saw not just wealth or power, but the same kindness her father had possessed. "I do," she said, her voice carrying across the room like a bell announcing freedom. The kola nut ceremony followed with prayers for fertility and prosperity. Palm wine was shared among the elders. Praise singers told the story of how love conquered betrayal, how patience defeated greed, how justice arrived like the morning sun after the darkest night. The news came as the celebration continued. "Sir," Abdullah's head of security approached, "the arrests are proceeding as planned. Mrs. Sao is being charged with inheritance fraud, document forgery, conspiracy, bribery, and corruption. Her son Kwame has agreed to testify against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. Commissioner Traore faces immediate removal and federal corruption charges. Maitre Diop's law license has been permanently revoked." "What about the stolen assets?" Zainab asked, her concern extending beyond herself. "Everything taken from your father's estate is being restored immediately. Additionally, Mrs. Sao's personal assets are being seized to compensate other families she defrauded over the years." 3 months later came the most satisfying moment, returning to Tauba for the traditional second ceremony. The entire village gathered under the ancient baobab tree where she had been rejected. But this time she arrived not as a supplicant begging for justice, but as a queen returning to claim her rightful place. The elders prostrated themselves in genuine remorse. The neighbors who had watched her humiliation in silence now ululated with joy. Even her childhood friend Aisha approached with tears streaming down her face. "Zainab," she whispered, "can you ever forgive me?" "I forgive you, Aisha," Zainab said, embracing her friend. "But our friendship must be rebuilt on truth this time." The celebration lasted 3 days and 3 nights. Traditional drummers played rhythms that had echoed through Tauba for centuries. Master weavers demonstrated techniques that would ensure the village's textile traditions survived another generation. Children laughed and played games that their grandparents remembered. 6 months after her marriage, Zainab received news that transformed their personal happiness into generational blessing. She was pregnant. A new generation, Baba Amadou declared when he heard, his voice trembling, "A child who will inherit not just material wealth, but spiritual wisdom. Not just property, but principles that will guide them through whatever challenges the future may bring." As the celebration continued around them, Zainab placed her hand on her still flat belly and whispered a promise. "Little one, you will grow up knowing that justice exists in this world, that good people can triumph over evil, that your character matters more than your circumstances." The transformation of Miriam from predator to penitent had been one of the most surprising developments. After serving 4 years in federal prison, she emerged broken but not bitter, humbled by her experiences and genuinely remorseful. Her first act upon release was to seek out Zainab. "I know I can never undo the suffering I caused," she said, tears streaming down her face as she knelt before the woman she had once tried to destroy. "But if you will allow me, I want to spend whatever years I have left trying to heal some of the wounds I created." Zainab looked into her former stepmother's eyes and saw something unexpected, genuine repentance. The decision to forgive had not been easy, requiring months of prayer and consultation with elders. But when forgiveness finally came, it brought peace that surprised everyone. In Africa, we say, "The axe forgets, but the tree remembers." Yet sometimes, when both axe and tree seek healing, new growth becomes possible. 5 years later, Zainab Ndiaye stood in the renovated textile workshop that had once belonged to her father, now expanded into a thriving African fashion house that employed over 400 people and exported to markets across Europe, America, and Asia. Her 4-year-old daughter, Fatou, played among the looms while master weavers taught young apprentices. "Mama," little Fatou asked, pointing to a framed photograph of her grandfather Ibrahima, "tell me the story again about how kindness became our crown." Zainab smiled, lifting her daughter to her hip while workers continued their ancient craft around them. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a young woman who lost everything, her father, her home, her very identity. But she never lost her kindness. And in the end, that kindness became her crown, just as her mother had promised." Little Fatou listened with wide eyes. "And the bad woman?" "Even the bad woman found redemption," Zainab said softly. "Because in Africa, we believe that no night is so dark that the morning sun cannot find it. No heart is so hard that love cannot soften it. And no wrong is so great that justice and forgiveness together cannot heal it." The workers hummed old songs as they wove. The talking drums echoed in the distance, and over the workshop door, in golden letters, hung her mother's words, "Your kindness will be your crown."